Two strangers meet on a street corner. Neither one speaks yet. Before a single word is exchanged, their right hands move toward each other, palms open, fingers curling into a brief, practiced grip. 2, maybe 3 seconds. Then they let go. Nobody taught them the timing. Nobody explained the pressure. And yet somehow, across cultures, across centuries, across people who have never met before in their lives, the motion is almost identical. Most people assume this is just politeness, a greeting, a social nicety we picked up somewhere along the way, like saying bless you after a sneeze. That is not what a handshake is. A handshake is a survival mechanism, and underneath its calm, ordinary surface, it is still doing exactly the job it was built for thousands of years ago, proving in a few seconds that the stranger in front of you is not about to kill you. Go back far enough, and every human interaction between strangers carried the same unspoken question. Does this person intend to harm me? There was no small talk to soften that question. There was no time for it. A stranger approaching meant a decision had to be made almost instantly. Fight, flee, or trust. The hand became the answer. An open right hand, empty and extended, meant one specific thing above all else. I am not holding a weapon. In a world where the right hand was the hand most people used to grip a blade, showing it empty and letting someone else grip it in return was as close to a guarantee of peace as two strangers could offer each other without saying a word. This is where the story could stop, a simple gesture of nonviolence fossilized into modern etiquette. But it doesn't stop there. Because the moment researchers started looking closely at where this gesture appears in the historical record, something stranger began to surface. Carved into Greek funerary reliefs dating back to the 5th century BCE, there is a specific pose that shows up again and again. Two figures, often the living and the dead, clasping right hands in a gesture called dexiosis. It was not casual. It was not incidental. It was a formal symbol of trust extended across a boundary that could not be crossed back. The boundary between life and death itself. Which raises an uncomfortable question. If the handshake was powerful enough to symbolize a bond that survived death, what exactly were people afraid of losing when they let go of a stranger's hand? The Romans took the gesture and turned it into infrastructure. Fides, the Roman concept of trust, loyalty, and good faith, was often sealed with a clasped hand, sometimes carved directly onto coins and tombstones as a symbol of an unbreakable agreement. Trade deals, political alliances, marriage contracts, an entire economic and legal system built centuries before written contracts became standard, rested partly on a gesture that took less time than a heartbeat. By the time European knights began removing their gauntlets before greeting one another, the meaning had barely shifted. A bare hand extended toward another bare hand was still saying the same primal sentence it always had. I could hurt you right now. I am choosing not to. Centuries later, the ritual had not weakened. It had simply gone quiet, hiding inside job interviews, business deals, and first dates, where people still swear they can tell everything about a stranger. Which means the ancient decision, is this person safe, never actually stopped being made. It only got relabeled as first impressions. Then, in 2015, a study out of the Weizmann Institute noticed something researchers had somehow never properly documented before. They filmed hundreds of strangers shaking hands, then quietly analyzed what those strangers did with their own hands immediately afterward, when they thought no one was watching. People raised their right hand toward their own face, again and again. Nearly a third of participants did it within seconds of contact, without any awareness they were doing it at all. They were smelling the other person's hand. Human beings, it turns out, may still be gathering chemical information about a stranger through touch, sweat, skin, invisible traces of hormones, the same way animals across the natural world identify threat, health, and kinship through scent. The handshake dressed up as a polite social custom, may actually be a disguised sampling ritual. A few seconds of contact used to extract information the conscious mind never even registers. This changes what is actually happening on that street corner. It is not two people exchanging a greeting. It is two nervous systems quietly interrogating each other in a language older than language itself, hidden inside a gesture so ordinary that almost no one questions it. And once you see the handshake this way, it becomes impossible to see the rest of human civilization the same way either, because trust, at scale, is the single most fragile resource any society depends on. Currency only works if strangers believe a piece of paper represents value. Law only works if strangers believe an agreement will be honored after they walk away. Cities only function because millions of people who will never personally verify each other's intentions still manage to cooperate, trade, and coexist without descending into constant suspicion. Somewhere underneath all of that complexity is still the same ancient problem two strangers faced on an open plain thousands of years ago. And somewhere underneath the version of ourselves that files taxes and negotiates contracts and shakes hands after a job interview is still the same nervous system running the same old calculation. Which makes what happened in 2020 more revealing than it first appeared. When health authorities around the world suddenly told billions of people to stop shaking hands, something deeper than habit was disrupted. People visibly did not know what to do with their hands. Elbow bumps, awkward waves, foot taps, nervous laughter. For a ritual so small, its absence created a strange low-grade unease that outlasted the initial shock of the pandemic itself. It was not simply that a custom had been interrupted. It was that an entire species had lost, almost overnight, its default method of quickly, physically proving to a stranger, I am not a threat. And nothing fully replaced it. Not verbally, not culturally, certainly not overnight. Which suggests something the modern world rarely likes to admit about itself. For all the language, technology, and social infrastructure separating us from the earliest humans who ever faced a stranger across open ground, the underlying question has never actually gone away. It has only been buried under layers of politeness, wrapped inside a gesture so brief and so automatic that most people never once stop to ask what it is really doing. Every handshake is a tiny negotiation with fear, a 3-second ritual in which two nervous systems quietly agree, without ever discussing it out loud, to set down their ancient suspicion of one another, at least for now. And maybe that is the part worth sitting with, not the history, not the biology, but the fact that underneath every ordinary human interaction, there is still a much older, much quieter question being asked. Somewhere in the space between two open palms, we are still asking each other the same thing our ancestors once asked, standing across from a stranger with nothing but their bare hands to prove they meant no harm. We just call it a hello now.